we're really going to have hope. Well, I hope you've been enjoying Tucson summer. I hope your car hasn't broken down, you've had no flat tires, and your air conditioner still works. Not only your automobile one, but the one at your home. It's been a pretty rough time for our community, and we need to especially keep in our prayers the people we normally think about in the wintertime, who are now stuck outside in the summertime in this extreme heat. As Christians, through our baptisms, you and I are caught up in the hope of Jesus Christ. We are in circumstances and situations as God's Christian children that are just as difficult as the problems and situations that everyone else faces. I've heard lots of Christians say, well, if you're a really good Christian, God's going to take great care of you in this life, and you will be just fine. You'll have abundant wealth, you'll have good health, you'll have great faithful friends, and nothing will go wrong. Hogwash. It's just not true. You and I, as Paul told us, are also the victims of our sin. And though Paul knew what he wanted to do, he found it very difficult to do. And in Paul's life, the circumstance was that as a previous Pharisee who wanted to judge people in their failure, now a man of Christ who is asked not to judge people in their failure, but to bring instead the forgiveness of God through Jesus Christ into people's lives. Imagine how that butted itself into each other in Paul's life. A lifetime of training to be judged, and a few months or years perhaps filled with God's grace and abundant forgiveness. It's hard to get out of that pattern in one's life. You and I are faced with the same kind of thing. The whole world around us wants to be in the position of judge over all kinds of other people. You know, we talk about Lutheran missionaries. We've been praying frequently on Sundays for our Lutheran missionaries all over the world, because they are caught up in that world probably in a bit bigger way than you and I are. They're faced with circumstances that can be absolutely life-threatening. I remember sitting with Ron and Becky talking about Ron's time in New Guinea and how radically different that was as a place to live and be in the world, outside of the norm of the world, where the church and the church's missionaries could literally be murdered for bringing this message of hope in Jesus Christ. You and I are rarely faced with that. We don't have that problem, but we too are called to bring a message of hope. And in many of our lives, we are doing that regularly. But sometimes we forget. If I'm riding with the boys, they have gotten into the habit now of emptying the cash out of my pocket every time we see a homeless person. And Jesse usually empties his pockets as well. You see, I think that's a call on my life as a Christian. I think I'm in a place in my life where I can choose to live like the world lives. I can choose to keep everything for myself, and my Lord, I and we have abundance beyond belief. And I think it's God's call in my life, because I am a captive of hope in Jesus Christ, to reach out with whatever I have available to those people around me who need that kind of help. We're at the corner of Grant and Campbell the other day. We were heading out to pick up Jan to take her to see, what did we go see? Despicable Me 3. With Minions and Drew, and we got to the corner of Grant and Campbell, and here is a little, I believe, old man probably had not showered or bathed in months or perhaps years. The temperature was 112, and he's standing on a corner asking for some assistance to get food. And I sat back in the line to turn left down Grant, into the construction that's going on Grant to the west now. And I watched car after car after car pull by this old man. And I'm thinking, how can you do that? How can you pull by somebody who's in that circumstance, another child of God, a person who is a treasure in God's eyes, and dismiss them? And so I reached into my pocket and I handed him, I had $5 in cash, because now the movie place takes credit cards, so you don't have to carry a load of cash. I pulled the $5 out of my wallet. I had a bottle of water from church that I'd just gotten, and that hadn't been touched. I had it up in the cup holder to my left in the van, and I handed that to him. I said, it's kind of warm, but I said, warm doesn't matter. What you need is water. And the minute he got money, he left to get food. He had a great need in his life. A couple weeks ago, we were down at, what's the taco place down the street?
Del Taco.
Del Taco. A lady who reminded me of my grandmother was there with her shopping cart full of all of her life's belongings. Melody doesn't know about this one. So I pulled into the parking lot and parked, and I was taking the boys in to get food after church. And I walked up to her and I said, I think today is a day when God is going to surprise you and bless your life. And I had a $50 bill in my pocket. I wasn't going to starve, but it might be all she would have for the coming week. And she wasn't begging. She was just trying to kind of sort through her stuff. And she was kind of tidy and clean. And she, after I gave her the money, she went in and bought a meal for herself. I don't mean to say that everybody we encounter is not going to abuse the grace of God that we share with them. But that's not my problem. My problem as a captured, I'll get it. My problem as being captive of God's grace is that I can't let that stuff go by, because I know where I could be if it wasn't for God's grace. I know how richly and abundantly God has blessed my life. Good Lord, I have 8 children. Now, it's not a blessing every day, but it's a blessing most days, and it's especially a blessing at 8:30 at night when they go to bed. And we say prayers, and I try to calm them down enough to settle in to get to sleep for the night. And I have to tell you, this summer has been wonderful because the boys have learned most of the time, Josiah, most of the time, have learned to stay quiet so Mom and Dad can sleep until 7:30 in the morning. That's been a wonderful blessing for us, a big blessing for us. But we need to remember who we are. That as captives of God's hope in Jesus Christ, the world needs us. The world needs to know the power of Christ's love in our lives to make it a difference and a change, to really help that along, to help the gospel of Jesus Christ move forward in the lives of people. And at the very same time, we're stuck where Paul is. We're stuck with, hey, I got $50 in my pocket. That's my money. That's my resources. I'm not going to give that away to anybody. That's the other side of who we are. As we live simultaneously as saints and sinners, that's the battle we have in us. And don't think I didn't think about that with that $50. Until finally, God's Spirit gave me a boot in the fanny and said, you don't need it. But that woman does. And I assisted her with a special gift. And I let her know where it had come from. That's not a gift from me, that's a gift from God. And that's who you and I are. We have a hope in our lives that the rest of the world does not know. The world outside of Christian faith does not have the same hope that you and I have. I think some are close to it in their religious traditions, but they don't have the same hope that you and I have. We are the captives of hope in Jesus Christ. And if you don't get that in the church, you really need to be here every Sunday and never miss, because that is how our lives get transformed. And you know what? The experience in my life has been that other Christians come into my life in the same way. I remember many years ago when the daycare was in, and we had a mother who was pregnant. She had a little boy in our daycare, and her husband was overseas, military family. And she couldn't get down to clean floors in her kitchen or take care of anything. So I went into her home as her pastor. They'd been coming to church. I went into her home on my hands and knees and scrubbed her tile floors. Can't do that anymore. It's too painful to get down on my knees anymore. And the response to that was thankfulness, but the family never came back to church. I did that out of God's grace. I think she was embarrassed. I went and visited later, and I said, we really miss you, but they never, once her husband came home from the military, they never came back. You see, we never know. It's not that the response is guaranteed. The response is never guaranteed. What is guaranteed is the gift of God that comes through us, through me, through you, in the lives of people. That's what's guaranteed. And that's God's grace. And as we know, people all have the choice of whether or not to accept it or to walk away from it. But again, that's not my problem. My problem is when I am not the mediator of God's grace in the world. Please remember who you are. Remember the hope that lives in you through Jesus Christ. And let God's Spirit, let her guide you every day in who you are. And Melody can tell you, boy, I'm not always there by any means. You know what? Most of us aren't. We live with that in our lives all of the time. And we've got the lesson from Romans to prove it. That it's real and 2,000 years old and much older than that. But what I have and what you have is Jesus Christ. And God's love and forgiveness, bounty and blessing through his only begotten Son. In the name of Jesus Christ, may you be filled with hope. Amen.